All right. Hello, beautiful people. Friends, welcome back to Midweek Manna. Now, I'm coming at you a day late this week, but here we are. And today, I want to talk about questions. Questions about church. Questions about Jesus. Questions about the Bible. Because I saw a tweet recently, which is a Twitter post. It was written by author, scholar, and speaker Jamar Tisby, who writes this. Someone who is not Christian described their general experience with white evangelicals as people who don't have any questions. I immediately knew what they meant, and I'm going to be thinking about that statement a long time. Someone who is not Christian described their general experience with white evangelicals as people who don't have any questions. Think of that, and I think of what another scholar and author who I appreciate named Pete Enns. It's the title of one of his books that he calls The Sin of Certainty. So, friends, I'm a pastor. Clearly, I'm about faith. And faith is something that's written about in the Bible a lot. It's what Jesus calls us to. But I think what that person that Jamar was meeting with and what Pete Enns is describing is that a faith that is unexamined or faith that doesn't have a sense of curiosity or faith that doesn't feel like questions can be asked. That's a faith that will struggle when it is outside the walls of the church. And as I thought about this myself, I think that's one of the reasons why today so many of the people in our churches struggle with having friends who are outside the church. Because we don't know how to give space for questions. It's almost this fear that if we try to engage the questions, if we think about questions, we'll lose our faith. And I think that's a belief that needs to be questioned. Because, friends, our Bible has some weird stuff in it. Like, there's stuff about bears eating children. There are talks about people who are hundreds of years old, like these half human, half divine beings. Story about one dude even going up in a cyclone. The Bible has some wild stuff. And I think we should have some questions about this. Questions are good things. And I'm taking my cues even from Jesus in this. Let's look at Jesus in this one instance. And if you've been around church, you might be surprised that I'm using this story, but stay with me. I want to tell you about a guy named Thomas. Thomas was a follower of Jesus, and based on what we know, it seemed like he was really all in. Because after Jesus was arrested and murdered, and basically all those who were part of his inner group were going to be arrested too. So Thomas had to go into hiding because people knew that this Thomas is following Jesus, and because we took Jesus out, we got to find Thomas too. Now, even those outside the church know the story. Jesus didn't stay dead. And Jesus returns. And Jesus and Thomas then have this encounter after some of the other disciples have already seen Jesus. And Thomas has some questions. Like, And it's interesting. This is why you might be surprised I'm using this story because why I'm using the story to speak positively about questions because Thomas is usually referred to as doubting Thomas, someone who asks questions and he shouldn't be. He's doubting what he sees. Um, he, he's being seen as a person who does not have faith. And I think we need to reframe how we think about him. Thomas was questioning. He was curious. And I love how Jesus responds because Jesus answers Thomas's questions by showing him the actual wounds and allowing Thomas to come in and touch them himself. Now, yes, at the end of this encounter, Jesus does tell him that Thomas would have been even more blessed if he had just believed. But Jesus also doesn't condemn the questions. In our world today, a culture where beliefs cannot be questioned, or being part of a place where those who are curious or question askers, or even perhaps skeptics or doubters, are silenced, is part of the reason why people see the church as a place where they can't grow. And the good news about this is that I think our Bible truly teaches us something different. It teaches us and shows us that we can examine our faith, we can study things, we can question things. We can not be, it's okay to not be certain. So, friends, your questions are welcome. Curiosity, it can create a way for faith to bloom. They're not examples of unbelief, they're examples of maturing faith. So let's be willing to ask questions. I'm not going to claim I have all the answers. But we can have some great discussions over a lunch or cup of coffee. And I think we can grow together through that, even if we don't come to the same conclusions. And I think our faith will be more mature because of it. That's good news. So ask questions. Ask questions in the comments if you want. I'm here. Questions are welcome in this church and in God's house and in the presence of God. Amen. Go in peace, friends. You are loved. We will see you next week on Midweek Manna.